day, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for what I believe is a very special webinar this afternoon. We have on the line Sheridan Smith, who I'll introduce fully in a moment, but he's going to be talking about the ISC2 Bermuda chapter and also the recent Security Congress in New Orleans, which I'm guessing many of us didn't make it to. I certainly didn't make it there this year. I would have loved to have been there. Some very good topics are spoken about, and that's why we're so lucky to have Sheridan, who was actually there and participating in the conference, to talk us through. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please do ask questions as we go along. There is space in the app, should be on the right-hand side of your window, but ask questions as we go along, please. All questions are welcome. We've got space at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you've got. So, please do ask away, and then we'll answer those at the end. No question is, is too big or too small. So please do ask them. And if it's too big and we don't get a chance to answer it on the webinar, we'll try and do so by email after the event. So Sheridan, let me bring you back in, and if you'd like to introduce yourself. I'm sure you're known to many of our Bermudian listeners today, but if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we'll start talking about the Security Congress.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. The ISC2 Congress. I've been going for about 8 years now, maybe a bit more. It really is a smorgasbord of what's happening in IT security, cybersecurity around the world, what the trends are, and also in terms of what's new and exciting coming out of ISC2. Just for our listening audience, those that don't know the history of ISC2, ISC2 is the world's leading cybersecurity and IT security professional organization. In June of 1988, a conference was hosted by NIST and the Federal Information Systems Security Educators Association at Idaho State University to address the need for standardized curriculum for the rapidly increasing profession. And there was a number of organizations there trying to standardize the profession. And the question was asked, why so many organizations trying to accomplish the same thing? So it was agreed that they would form a consortium that would work to put together a common body of knowledge, which was finally produced in 1990. And shortly after that, ISC2 was formed in 1992. Launching their first credential, which is the CISSP credential, in 1994, since which they have 4 or 5 others, the latest one being in 2015, the CCSP, which is cloud-related, I believe. In the ISC2 local Bermuda chapter was formed, we started chartering in January of this year. I myself have been a member of ISC2 since 2004. Been in the profession a very long time. I'd rather not say, I would give myself away there. But it was formed in January of this. We've been chartering and got our official chapter in July of this year. Our vision is to deliver value to our community by providing expertise and leadership to address cyber, information, software, and infrastructure security, which is inclusive of people, processes, and technology. We want to be a resource for cybersecurity education, awareness programs, and technical expertise in our community. And we're excited about where we're going. We've had 4 events this year, some of which were really well attended and got some international press. We had a live hacking demonstration earlier this year, which got us some international press and was very, very well attended. So that's what we're in terms of ISC2 and Bermuda. In terms of the Congress, as I said, it was a smorgasbord of information. The tracks, Darren, if you want to change the slide.
We can leap into that, Sheridan. Let's have a look at start going through the deck. And as we do that, I would just encourage anyone who is working within IT or working within information security, particularly if you're based in Bermuda, go and speak to Sheridan, find out how you can actually join up and become part of ICS2, because it is a good, good organisation, and it does really help its members. in understanding and keeping up to date with these matters. So I'd really encourage that. Okay, so here's the tracks then, Sheridan. Lots of good stuff on here. Lots of stuff that we'd expect to see. Cloud security, cybercrime, governance, regulation, and compliance. Were there any? Which one of these tracks was the one that you, or the couple that you particularly favoured?
Yeah, for me, I was particularly interested in the incident response forensic track, the government regulation and compliance track, and the threats track in particular, Peoplecentric track as well. Sorry. So I did those 4 tracks in particular, and I also did one session in cybercrime. So I did about 5 tracks in my 3 days.
Wow, that must have kept you busy. I know how jam-packed those things.
Yes, you move from one room to the next.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying you move from one room to the next, and you got to be moving pretty quickly because they do fill up. ISC2 really sold out this year, and so it was definitely jam-packed.
And I know we'll be covering some of this as we go through on the individual slides, but were there any particular takeaways or one key learning that you took away from one or other of the tracks?
Yeah, in particular, incident response. From that particular track, I took away the fact that although we may have a really perfect plan on paper, unless you exercise it, you can really find yourself, from examples that were given, can find yourself on the shorter end of properly resolving an incident when it arises. So that one definitely stood out for me.
You're absolutely right, and that's one of the areas that organisations usually trip up on. They have a great plan on paper, but they don't have the ability to execute it, or indeed to test that execution. I'll give a very quick example, and Sheridan, you may have heard this one before. I sometimes use this in presentations that I give, but if you think about how many people used to die in fires in New York City. I use New York City, but any built-up area this can apply to. Hundreds of people, often thousands of people, used to die in large metropolitan areas due to fire. Now these days, death by fire is actually, thankfully, greatly reduced in such areas, and that's for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons is we have an incident response plan that is well practiced. We're all familiar with, the test ringing of the fire alarm bell, once a week or once a month, depending on where you are in the world and what the local codes are. And, at least, here in the UK, in our US offices, pretty much the same. We have a test evacuation every 6 months to make sure that everyone knows where the exits are and how long it takes to get out of the building and all that kind of stuff. That, to me, incident response and testing and training is really about the practice of those behaviours, a little bit like the fire alarm test that we have. So,
yes, but I noticed one thing I did notice is that a lot of the people that were there, a lot of companies that were there, were very much in the early stages of putting together a proper incident response plan and actually testing it out. One of the things that I've discovered over the years is the challenge of trying to get all the resources in the room at the same time. If you're testing an incident that is going to affect the company globally, that requires legal representation, HR, etc., trying to get everybody in the room to do a tabletop exercise or some other form of incident response testing is a challenge. Trying to get everybody in the room at all the resources at the same time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sheridan. One of the answers we have to that is actually making them fun, actually making them something that, before people actually turn up, they may be thinking, it's, some practice run of something, it's going to be really boring, but actually making them quite exciting. And we've run events like that, and there have been people who have, declined attending, who have come up to us afterwards and said, I heard it was really good. I want to make sure I'm on the next one. Please make sure I'm on the list for the next one. So, trying to turn that around and actually making it something that's, fun to be involved in, as well as a serious subject too. But look, we've got lots to cover, and you and I, Sheridan, we can talk for our nations independently. Let's move on to the next slide. And you just let me know how, I know you've got some bits and pieces and we've talked through some of these slides. So why don't you talk about this one here, especially Congressman Cedric Richmond and his particular focus.
Yeah, what attracted me particularly to this particular keynote presentation, which was held on the Monday, was the fact that I have been involved with the Bermuda government in putting together cybersecurity, working together in a working group, putting together our cybersecurity strategy, et cetera. And it's been exciting, and it goes to show that a lot of countries have work to do and legislation to prepare. But this congressman, what caught me most about his speech was his concern that it's not taken serious enough in terms of the U.S. Government's concern for cybersecurity at the deepest levels. He was a bit perturbed by the lack of enthusiasm to put together proper legislation to deal with international global security issues. That definitely what caught me most about his particular speech.
Yeah, I think
he wasn't, to be honest, he wasn't the best of speakers, so he doesn't stand out as, but the content was definitely very much based on his concerns for America and the lack of enthusiasm and legislation in America to deal with. Because, he talks about things like GDPR, et cetera. America is behind the times in his opinion with respect to cybersecurity and proper legislation dealing with data privacy, et cetera.
Yeah, and I would probably agree with him as well. And I think it's coming down to the individual states in the US at the moment. CCPA, which is the Californian Consumer Protection Act, has been passed, and that's coming into effect 1st of January 2020. Obviously, we've got PIPA coming into effect in Bermuda. Yes. We've got GDPR already live here in Europe, and when you look at a map, and for those of you who have seen me speak, you'll have seen a map very often, or you very often use a map showing all the countries that have got some form of data protection regulation. And there's more countries that have some form of data protection than don't, including some quite surprising ones like Russia and China as well. So yes. The US does stand out a little bit for its general data protection.
Yes.
Regulation. There's things like HIPAA, and there's certain things for the SEC as well. But yeah, I agree with his concerns in that respect, Sheridan. So, all right, let's. So the threat track.
Yeah, threat hunting. Well, threat hunting is something I'm particularly interested in. As a matter of fact, the ISC2 Bermuda chapter hosted an event last month with Ananth from Event Tracker, where he was talking about threat hunting. Threat hunting is a pretty interesting topic. I don't know if Darren, if you your organization are doing this, but just as a definition for those that are not aware, threat hunting is okay. So we have the good stuff in our network, and the bad guys want what we have, and they're attacking us as we speak. They're trying to get a foothold. So instead of waiting for someone to tell us that we've been hacked, threat hunting is a focused, iterative approach to seeking adversaries inside of your network. It requires an assumption that a paradigm shift, if you will, that despite our best defenses, the bad guys are inside. What now? The answer? Go looking for them. So threat hunting. So I went to this particular, because I was interested in this, I went to this particular session, and to see what this particular Christie was talking about. And it was, again, along the same lines of what I've been reading and understanding about threat hunting. Darren, are you familiar with this particular approach to cybersecurity?
Yeah, and it is a paradigm shift, as you say, Sheridan, but it's the right way round. The Robert Mueller, who obviously we hear more about these days for his investigations into President Trump, when he was the director of the FBI, he came up with what is one of my favorite quotes about cybersecurity. And he essentially said, and this is back in 2013, so we're talking, at least 5 years ago now. He came up with this quote when he was interviewed on CNN, and he said, there are really only two types of company: those who've been hacked and know they've been hacked, and those who haven't been hacked yet. And he said even those are now forming into two new groups: those who have been hacked and are about to be hacked again, and those who still don't know they've been hacked. Okay, I'm probably misquoting that a little bit, but the key aspect there is it's not a matter of if, it's more a matter of when. So this threat hunting really turns that assumption around and says, okay, well, if it's a matter of when, not if, okay, then let's turn it around and actually start to go looking for these guys in our network now. The FBI, they say that it takes 270 days on average for an organization to recognize that it's been breached and that they actually have hackers on time.
Yes, I have the same statistic in front of me. Time to discover, 200 plus days, and 80% of malware is tailored to the target network.
Yeah, and when I was working, I was presenting rather with some guys from the FBI, and we were talking about this on a panel in New York. They were coming out with statistics as well that said for the larger hacks, very often, even though these are large organizations, well-funded with cybersecurity teams, very often it's still the FBI who are coming back and actually telling them that they've been breached rather than them self-discovering. Not in all cases, but the FBI, perhaps they were overstating their case, but they were saying that in the majority of cases that was the case. So interesting statistics, nevertheless.
Yeah, then there was some talk about the definition, but there was some talk about the actual kill chain. Kill chain and having a win-win. So whether or not whatever you catch them anywhere in the cycle, you have a win, and they lose. So it's about getting as many wins as you can. And some of these threats we tend to always be focusing on external, but although they're some of these threats are internal, meaning employees looking for suspicious behavior from employees is also a part of threat hunting. If you see John Doe, all of a sudden he's downloading a lot of files to a USB drive when normally he doesn't download anything, then you can get concerned. So so the threat hunting was pretty interesting topic. One of the things I'm discovering though in this, and I was actually asked the question of the presenter, was what are the challenges in terms of resources for this? Yes, you can automate a lot of this with tools, the proper tools, but it still requires some quite a bit of human intervention and work. So the challenge is finding the resources to do this threat hunting, although it seems to be something that is imperative in this day and age, cybersecurity.
Yeah, it is, and it is a challenge, Sheridan. We've spoken previously about this challenge and how to overcome the challenge of having the right resources at the right time. Obviously, as a consultancy company, Fifth Step can help with that, but that's not always the answer. There is a certain degree of help and that organisations need to have in-house to be able to actually do the job, and the ability to show the statistics and to show the story of how you're actually hunting down people and preventing the data breaches and that kind of stuff. They're important statistics when you're running exercises like this.
Yep.
Good. So no presentation would be complete these days without at least one mention of
blockchain. Yeah. Well, I tell you, blockchain and me, we're not best friends. I'm still trying to wrap my head around blockchain. I'm actually at my age still studying, but yeah, I'm studying blockchain right now, and so I can fully understand what's going on. So I did attend a couple of the sessions that were blockchain related. This one in particular, I thought I wanted to talk about because it was a bit more informative about. If you go to the next slide, in particular about some of the potential applications for blockchain, so that it helped me to better understand what blockchain is all about. Tell me, Darren. I'm sure a guy. What can you know? What do you know about blockchain?
Well, the blockchain's a really exciting solution that in many cases is looking for a problem. There are lots of things that it could be used for, but its real benefit comes in the network effect and where markets can come together. Now, there are many opportunities to do that within financial services, and some are already being exploited and looked at and ramping up, and some are perhaps still in that that initial stage. But particularly in insurance, you've got on here the smart contracts. Smart contracts are very much a very powerful way for insurance companies to rapidly reduce costs for claims, for example, that are reported or validated by a third party. So the one that's always used, and I apologise for using it, but it is a stunning example. But if an airline reports that they've cancelled or delayed a flight, and that means that you have a legitimate claim on your travel insurance, then why should you have to be claiming through the insurance company to actually recognise that claim? If the airline's already said that you've checked in, or you've already indicated to the insurance company that you've checked in, and then the airline reports independently to the insurance company or to the blockchain that this flight has been cancelled or delayed, the insurance company can then examine that delay or that cancellation. Does it actually apply to one of their policy holders? Yes, it does. Oh, okay, well, let's trigger the payment now, so we don't have to do anything with claims in that respect. So things like that are going to be very, very powerful. And the other things, digital currency, everyone talks about that. I think I think it's a very powerful area, and there are lots of people who are very passionate about things like blockchain, and I think they have a real absolute future. But in many of the aspects that many of the people will be listening, who are listening today or watching today, will be thinking about is things about smart contracts, proving ownership, those kinds of things, where really a network of people, a network of where the blockchain really comes into its own. So it can be very powerful, though. And if you are investigating it and you need help with that, we have some very good experts, far more expert than myself in this area, who are actually helping organisations strategize this and actually implement blockchain too.
I thought the session would cover a bit more about the cybersecurity risk of blockchain. But it didn't. Can you elaborate maybe a couple of seconds on that one? What do you know the major risks to be?
Well, okay, so blockchain is places a lot of weight and a lot of dependency, and a lot on its inherent reliance on encryption. So there is an inherent safety that's built into it. Now, that doesn't mean that it's impenetrable or that there won't be hacks implemented. We've already seen instances of people's digital wallets being stolen. So those kinds of thefts and breaches can still take place. So from that perspective, encryption is great, but it does require some planning and some forethought, and not an over-reliance on it, because there are many encryption mechanisms that are now redundant because they can be brute force attacked, or they've been cracked, etc., etc. And we all, many of us will have read stories about those kinds of things. So we have to remain vigilant. Encryption is great, but you can't just fire and forget on that kind of thing. You still have to maintain good security controls and good best practice in order to ensure that you're safe. But a lot of organisations will be considering blockchain to be far more secure than their traditional transaction ledger, for example, just simply because it inherently includes encryption.
Encryption, right? Yep. Okay.
Good. Okay, let's flick on to this next slide. There we go. Oh, here we go. Selecting security controls. We can we queued that one up nicely, Sheridan. When you talk us through this one.
Yeah, sure. Security controls is one of my favorite areas of what I do for a living. This one in particular was this session in particular talked about security controls, and it went through a number of standards and control objectives that can be used. But it's amazing how a number of companies still do not have the basic controls. For instance, a simple control as when someone someone terminates employment, that there is no control to remember to terminate his Active Directory access at the same time, or simple things like that. It's amazing. It was the presenter asked a number of questions of people, and it was amazing to see the number of hands that go up that still don't have the basic controls in place. So I thought this was a good session. If you go through the slides, you'll see some of the things that were shared. But then there are not, as you know, there are a number of standards that we can use to help us to put together these controls within our various organizations. But he talked about the importance of having the controls in order to be compliant with these various regulations here and regulators. And then the importance of having controls at the various levels, both technical and non-technical, at the operating system level, application level, database and infrastructure, etc. So yeah, the controls, he talked about different types of controls.
That's the example you gave there, Sharon. It reminds me of an engagement that we had with a client a few years ago now, about 5 years ago actually, and we did a security audit, and we were looking through some aspects and looking at the user permissions and all that kind of stuff, and we very quickly identified the most powerful person within the organization. Now, Sheridan, if I was to ask that question of you, who's the most powerful person in an organization, you might be thinking, oh well, it's someone on the C-suite, someone like that, or it's
no, not at all. It's a guy with the admin password.
Yeah, it could be the guy with the admin password. Do you know who it was in this particular organization though? They'd started a graduate scheme about a year before, and they were passing graduates through every area of the company. And whilst they did have a starter and a leaver process, they didn't have a mover process. So every time these people moved between areas of the organization, they inherited and retained, their old access rights, and they inherited new access rights. So now this was an insurance company, so you can imagine a situation. They started on they started in one side of finance, so they could receive payments. They then moved on to the payable side of finance, so they were actually able to settle payments and make payments in that respect, and set up accounts and all that kind of stuff. They then moved into underwriting. They then perhaps moved into claims. Now, just putting those three together, those three departments or four roles together, any person would then have the right to set up a new organisation within the general ledger. They would be able to underwrite, within certain limits, a policy. They would be able to process the claim, and they would be able to make the payment within the payment system, the general ledger system. So the segregation of duty are completely broken down by virtue of the graduate scheme. Now, luckily, either the graduates hadn't realised, or they were all far too honest. I'm sure it was the latter, but they were all far too honest to actually do anything like that. But our security audit quickly identified that the controls not only lacking, but there were actually breaches that were in potential right there in the end. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing the number of companies done. For instance, another one in that I find popular is application audits. So you give your group of employees access to your great general ledger, and you don't review that on a periodic basis to ensure that they still have the right access. So stuff like that is also, I think, important to consider when putting together controls.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if they'd had a periodic review that had been fully exercised, then obviously those people with access, who still had access would have been identified, far more quickly than they actually were. But as it was, some of the people had been on there for over 12 months, but the program had been running properly. I think it was about 12 months by the time we got there, but some of the people had access rights that went back beyond 12 months. So
Yes.
very, very powerful.
So and these are some of the procedural controls that you mentioned. I think the contractor access control was something that was, I think, result of the Target incident. Wasn't it the fact that the contractor, there was interconnectivity between the contractor's network and Target, and they actually infiltrated through the contractors? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it was the HVAC company, wasn't it,
Yes.
who were actually breached, and
Yes.
whether they were targeted or not, I can't remember now. But they had a VPN that dialed straight into Target's network, and once the hackers were into Target's network, they were regarded as, broadly speaking, they were regarded as a friendly and to have more access than they should have done. So no presumption of minimal access in Target's controls. The other really depressing thing about that is they'd recently implemented a new system, a new security monitoring system, and it had been in test for the last month or something like that. And they were very used to, they were tuning it, so they were very used to lots of messages coming through. But actually, the system was very busily alerting them to the fact that they were being breached, but everyone was diligently ignoring it because the system was still, as far as they were concerned, being tuned, and therefore should be ignored until further notice. So it's quite unfortunate when everything's in place, but people are actively ignoring it.
Yep.
On that.
Yeah, and then he just went through the various different controls that you can get, through the various different bodies, standardizing bodies. This is one. This is the NIST control family here. This is one I'm quite familiar with and working through. And then that's the end of that topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought that was a good topic. Again, controls are a very important aspect of cybersecurity and information systems management systems.
They are, Sheridan, and people have to make sure that these things are in place. It should really be it's one of those areas that's fully under IT's control to put the right kinds of general controls in place. It's not one of those areas where you can say, oh, we haven't got the full support or sponsorship of the rest of the business. It's an area where a CIO, an IT director, head of IT, whatever your title is, if it's within your area of expertise and responsibility, should really be making sure it's getting done. And if you need help, then reach out to the right people, either within your organization or externally, to make sure that you can get it done.
Yes. Yep. So the Peoplecentric track, I guess this will probably be my favorite track. I certainly enjoy the Peoplecentric track. So this one was pretty interesting, but this was put on by MIT, and they had done some research, or have been doing and continue to do some research in this area, and putting together what they would consider to be the ultimate book on how to develop a cybersecurity culture. They did a survey prior to this Congress. They did a survey with I think it was 100, no, less than that, about 40 ISC2 member companies, and those results were shared at the event.
That's phenomenal there, and look at that number there, Sheridan. 89% of companies say they've been a victim of a cyber attack within the last 12 months. Really does prove out that it's the when, not the if.
That's right. And 84% due to unsafe human behaviors. It reminds me of the Great Wall of China. The biggest vulnerability of the Great Wall of China, despite all the years and manpower invested in developing those walls, the biggest vulnerability is the guy at the gate.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, I mean, people really. I mean, there's a phrase that we use a lot. We're not alone in using this at all, but people are the perimeter. So being able to have and to monitor and understand the behaviour, the normal behaviour of your users. So you may have a receptionist. He signs in every day from a desktop that's on the reception. If he suddenly starts signing in from within one of the data centers, that shouldn't be considered to be normal behavior, even if it's authorized access. So being able to monitor that kind of behavior and understand that people have patterns, and being able to watch those patterns, or indeed better still being able to react to those patterns when they change, just by raising the alert. May be completely innocuous, but Bob is now suddenly signing in from from the data center. Usually only ever signs in from this desktop location.
Yeah.
Those kind of things, they can make a difference.
I think it's important to get that total buy-in from the top all the way down. I see it as a case of we are at war, cyber war, and all of us, from the general right along down to the private, are responsible for the security of the company the jewels of the company we work for. And it requires everybody's buy-in, everybody's participation, everybody's engagement in order to be successful. It really is. Because again, if you got a company of 100 people and 99 of them are really, really well aware and keep a good password and don't write their password down and et cetera, but you got one person who really doesn't care and who's unaware and refuses to become aware, and that one person is the one way into the crown jewels. So I thought it was I like the idea of trying to develop a cybersecurity culture. It's something that I have, particularly myself, as you know, I won an award recently, something I enjoy doing, and putting together the proper programs to train people. I don't think you can do this with one session per year. You really can't. There's no way that you can train a military, a group of military people with one training session. You got to prepare them for all kinds of threats and eventualities. So having a good cybersecurity awareness program is important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sheridan. And I mentioned it out on LinkedIn. Some of the people listening and watching today perhaps were already aware. But congratulations again on that award. I think it's great kudos to you and to the the BMA team for that. But your point is very well made, that this kind of drive needs to be a top-down process. I read a phenomenal article about this on Forbes just this morning, actually, and I'll be writing an article on this. So if you don't already follow me on LinkedIn, then please do that, and then you'll see my take on this article. But essentially, it's saying that corporate boards are underprepared and ill-experienced in some instances, still too inexperienced in IT generally, but certainly in respect to information security. And the number of organisations who have CISOs who are reporting to the board, whilst it's increased, is actually not still at the levels that it needs to be. And corporate boards need to be taking that responsibility to ensure that they've got the non-executive directors, that they've got the CISOs, that they've got the virtual CISOs, the flex up, flex down CISOs from someone like FistStep or whoever, that actually are able to provide that independent advice and guidance to the board to actually ensure that they are taking the right actions and that they're aware of the risks, because it's actually a fiduciary duty to ensure that you're protecting your organization against a foreseeable risk. And these days you can't claim that cyber attack wasn't a foreseeable risk. So it's a really important one. But do please follow me on LinkedIn, and you'll see that you'll see me writing about that article.
Okay, cool.
Missed one slide there. There we go.
Yeah, that slide was just again talking about what the MIT Saloon Consortium is all about and what they're doing. The next slide is their framework that they believe will be influential in changing people's behavior. The external influences, things like posters and newsletters, and then the various different policies, etc., help to change values, attitudes, and beliefs, which will ultimately change human behavior. So that's their model. And we're running out of time, so I just want to talk about this next track in particular. This one is really what got me going with respect to starting a chapter in Bermuda. last year I was at the Congress and I met Garfield. ISC2 has formerly had an organization known as ISC2 Foundation. They have changed, and now they are known as the Center for Cyber. What is it there? Center for Cyber Safety. And one of the things that they're doing, they've teamed up with Paws and Garfield, the cartoon character, and they're doing things in the elementary schools, middle schools. There's things I'd like to do here, and these things I like to present here in Bermuda. They are 35 to 40 minutes long. They include comic books and posters and a short cartoon teaching about privacy, posting online, bullying, etc. They have several more that they're putting together, but right now they finished the first 3. So we're looking to be ambassadors for this particular movement here in Bermuda. We want to get into the elementary schools and to the middle schools and help to keep our kids safe and secure online. Additionally, this organization provides information for parents. If you can continue to slide to the next slide. For parents, there's information on their site for seniors, sorry. I certainly encourage people to visit imcybersafe.org online, or the Center for Cyber Safety and Education, also online. Some really good stuff there. And this is one thing that really got me going with respect to wanting to start a chapter here. I really would love to I enjoyed teaching, and I really like to work with the kids in getting them to be safe and secure online, especially those in Bermuda. But I encourage anyone else globally listening to this that should certainly look into this for your community.
Sheridan, it's a brilliant initiative. It's and very much needed. I think that the key aspect there is that it provides information for parents. Many people listening will be parents and understand the challenges and struggles of helping and trying to teach children how to remain safe online. It's such a key part of modern life. And thinking,
yes.
I think the advice was on the previous, the previous slide. Think before you post and all that kind of thing, and all the various different ways that children can either be taken advantage of or actually do things that they don't appreciate, probably, not what they should be doing. But
yes.
It's a great thing, and like you, Sheridan, I would very much encourage people to, take advantage of these resources, because a lot of the work has been done, and it's all too easy these days to think, cybersecurity, it's all about our job, it's all about work, but personal cybersecurity and the cybersecurity of our families is actually also a very key part of, keeping the community as a whole, not just the business, safe. It's, a very key aspect.
Yeah, and this program, Garfield Program, has won the Teachers' Choice Award 2019 for the classroom. So the teachers throughout America consider this to be the best tool right now for teaching our kids about being safe online and cybersecurity. And they also won another award in 2018 this year for Small Not-for-Profit Business of the Year award. So this program is really doing well in America. While I was in New Orleans, there were 2,500 children went through the program while that week we were in at the Congress. Also, I want to add about the Congress before we go to the question and answer session is the Congress always makes sure that people are entertained after the daily sessions. One of the things that we did was a lot of fun. We had a riverboat ride on an old-fashioned riverboat and dinner, and they paraded us from the hotel to the dock. It's about 2 or 3 block walk with an old-fashioned New Orleans parade with the brass band and the drums and the guy out front with the umbrella. What's they call him? The bandmaster, I think. But they do try to make sure that people are. And then also another night we had dinner at what they call the Mardi Gras World, where they have a lot of the old floats and whatnot. So they also make sure that not only do we get valuable information throughout the day, but we're entertained at night. So it really is a very, very worthwhile endeavor, and I encourage people to join the Congress in 2019.
That sounds like, I mean, Sheridan, it's a great opportunity, and it's a valuable resource from a learning perspective, but a great experience. Now, I think the only thing that would make that experience actually better is if we can get hold of one of those Garfield suits and have you actually being Garfield. That would enhance it even more.
I'm working on actually getting Garfield in Bermuda for an event of some kind. We're really planning some good. The ISC2 Bermuda chapter is really hoping to get a good good year of events in 2019. So Garfield is hopefully one of them.
That's great. Well, but we've got a couple of questions. If anyone's got any other questions, then please do pose them. If not, we've got a couple of questions here, so we'll cover those off, and then if we've got time for some more, we'll cover them, and if not, we'll finish up. So, Sheridan, here's a good question that I think is really good for you, and it does actually mention your award. Given that you've recently won an award for an awareness program, what were the key aspects of what should a good awareness program actually include?
A good awareness program, I think, has to be based on a framework. I use a framework. It's four parts. So the first part of the framework is assess. Assess your troops, assess where people are, assess the threat landscape. What are the big concerns at your organization? Are you prevalent to phishing attacks, etc.? Then after assessing, the next step is to strategize, putting together a strategy for your security awareness training this year. So, okay, in January we're going to do password training, and then in February we'll do USB security, etc. So putting together a strategy to fill the gap after based on your assessment. Your assessment can include penetration testing. It can include phishing testing, just to get an idea of where your people are in terms of their understanding of cybersecurity. So assessment, strategy. After the strategy, you want to do the training. And that's what training I talked about. But my strategy is, as I don't believe in once a year, once a quarter. Every month, there's training every month online. Some of them is 10 minutes, no more than 15 minutes. But I make them gamified. I make them fun. I make them challenging. We included other things other than online. We had a escape room challenge this year. We had the live hacking demonstration and training after that this year. So the program, I think, is comprehensive. So after the assessment, the strategy, and then the training is the reinforcement. And the reinforcement includes things like posters. We put posters around the building and by the printer in the kitchen. We put newsletters out once a quarter. I would send an email on a regular basis about some portion of the policy, reminding people of the policy, etc. Clear desk policy, etc. If there's a ransomware going around, I would send out an alert to people, letting them know what's going on. We do regular phishing tests, phishing campaigns, USB campaigns, and so yeah. So that's our program. We try to be as comprehensive and thorough as possible. But I believe a framework is important. And again, my approach is sort of like this framework I use is like a military framework where you assess, strategize, train, and reinforce.
Yeah, it's a good process if you link that in, and I know you do, Sheridan. If you link that in with a continual improvement approach, so that as you get to the end of one of those cycles, you're actually saying, okay, what has changed about the organisation? What's
correct?
Changed about the threat landscape? What's which bad actors are we attracting now that we weren't attracting previously? Gives you a good opportunity to to cycle back round, and having it as part of a continuous improvement mechanism is a really good approach, to bring out and make clear that that we're not perfect, and we know that we're not perfect, and we're always looking to improve. And that really goes to build your culture of continuous improvement, but your culture of cybersecurity and keeping the organisation safe.
Getting everyone to see that everyone's important in this. We're all in this together. I think that's where also I stress that a lot, and I try. We come from the top down. That same belief.
Yeah. So we've got 2 more questions here. Still time if anyone wants to ask a quick additional question. This one, Sheridan, I've been asked questions like this myself, and I think it's a difficult one, but I'm going to pose it out there anyway. But what one behavioural change are you going to implement after attending this conference? Is there a behavioural change that you're going to take on board, or that you're going to recommend to members of your team, perhaps?
Yeah, if I had to pick one behavioral change is would be related to incident response, and the behavior change would be to be more vigilant and prepared, and not perhaps, I don't want to use the word nonchalant because I don't think my team is nonchalant, but I would say just be more vigilant and prepared for an incident. So when it happens, you know exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, that's a really good one, Sheridan. And then the last question that we've got here on the books, you've mentioned about CISOs. There was no mention of data protection officers. I've heard these two terms being used interchangeably. Is there a real difference? So let me pick that one up. Okay, so a data protection officer is something very specific towards the GDPR. It's also mentioned as part of PIPA and some other regulation around the world. In the US, it tends to be the US regulation as it stands at the moment, some aspects of NIST and the NYCRR 500 regulations for financial services, they tend to rely on the term CISO. They are slightly different terms, but the end result is the same. They both have the goal and objective to keep the data safe within the organization. You don't necessarily need both, which I think may be at the root of the question's question. You don't necessarily need both, but you should have at least one and make sure that both areas are being covered. So make sure that you're looking into that. I mean, there are options, and if you do want to reach out and need some help with that, then obviously you'd be more than happy to talk more about that and talk about some of the options. But make sure that you've got it covered from at least one of those angles, whether it be a DPO or a CISO. They should really cross over and complement one another, or at least the roles should. Sheridan, is there anything that you would add to that from your perspective?
No, I certainly, that's your area of expertise, but I do see them as two different roles. The data protection officer is a result of the GDPR and the PIPA type legislation. So the CISO has always been around, but yeah, I see them as, there could be some overlapping, but certainly I could consider them to be two distinct roles.
That's great stuff. Well, look, Sheridan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was really enjoyable. I appreciate that. And to those that are local and listening, I encourage you to come and join us and be a member of ISC2 Bermuda chapter. Love to have you on board. We're doing some good things next year and in the future. Yeah, please do that to take advantage. Sheridan's a big advocate for cybersecurity on the island, and it's really good to have such an advocate going out and actually both representing Bermuda and doing good stuff, but also bringing some great stuff to the island as well. So if you are on Ireland, do make sure that you have a chat with them about that. Recordings of this webinar, they'll be available over the next couple of days. You should get an email about that and where to download them from. If you don't subscribe to the Fifth Step podcast, then please do so. Remedy that immediately. That should be your top of your to-do list before you finish work today. Subscribe to the Fifth Step podcast, and then you'll get webinars like this and other podcasts that we do. You'll get those downloaded automatically to your smartphone. Thank you very much again, Sheridan, and thank you, Darren.
To a close. And
thanks everyone.
Hopefully you'll see lots of these guys on Ireland next year, and if not, you'll see them at the ICS2 Security Conference 2019.
I look forward to that. Take care, Darren. Take care, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.